Ayn Rand. You hear the name, and for a lot of people, it brings to mind these huge ideas about freedom, about capitalism, and the power of the individual. Her political philosophy? It's world famous. But what about the foundation that all of that is built on? Well, that's what we're going to dig into today, her theory of knowledge. Because it turns out her ideas about how we actually know what we know are, believe it or not, even more ambitious and way more controversial. And that, right there, is where the real debate kicks off. Now, before we dive in, let's get one thing straight. This isn't some kind of takedown. The critique we're looking at today actually comes from a place of respect for what Rand stood for, especially her defense of liberty. It comes from someone who's an ally in the fight for freedom, but who believes the philosophical foundation has a pretty critical flaw. And the source material really puts it perfectly. The political message is powerful, no doubt, but the theory of knowledge, the epistemology, that's where the problems start to creep in. So before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page with what that word epistemology actually means. You know, in simple terms, it's the part of philosophy that asks, how do we know stuff? It's not about what we know, but how we know it. You could almost think of it as the instruction manual for our own minds. And this is where we find two totally different manuals. At the very heart of this whole debate is a really fundamental question about how knowledge even gets made. Is it something we build, brick by certain brick? Or is it something we kind of guess at and then spend our time trying to fix? And this slide really gets to the core of it. Rand's view is a lot like building a house. You start with this perfectly solid foundation of self-evident truths, things you can just see and touch and perceive, and then you carefully stack the bricks of logic right on top. For her, this was absolutely crucial to ground knowledge in reality. But the critique, which is based on the philosopher Karl Popper, sees it completely differently. For him, knowledge isn't a building. It's more like a map. You start with a problem, like, hey, how do I get to that city? You make a guess, you draw a map, and then you test that map against the real world, constantly looking for mistakes so you can make the map better. It's not about finding a perfect foundation. It's all about making progress by finding and fixing our mistakes. Okay, but this raises a huge question, right? What happens when we're wrong? I mean, if our knowledge is built up from just observing reality, how do you explain mistakes? More importantly, how do you explain scientific progress, which is basically just a long history of one wrong idea getting replaced by a slightly less wrong one? Let's make this super concrete. Think about the stars. You look up at the night sky. What do you actually see? If you're a kid and you're just using your direct senses, what do you conclude? You'd say stars are these tiny, cold, kind of dim little dots. In Rand's world, this sensory data is the starting point. It's the first brick you lay down for your knowledge about stars. But of course, we know that's completely wrong. Our best scientific explanation today tells us the exact opposite. Stars are gigantic, unbelievably hot, and trillions of miles away. You can't directly perceive nuclear fusion. You can't feel the heat from light years away. This knowledge didn't come from just looking harder. It came from guessing, from creating wild explanations, and from testing, a process that proved our initial direct perception was just flat out wrong. And this whole idea has a name. It's called fallibilism. It's a really simple but powerful principle. We can be wrong. Our knowledge is never perfect. It's never finished. It's always a work in progress, always open to being corrected and getting better. It's literally the engine of progress that lets us go from thinking stars are tiny specks of light to understanding them as distant suns. This leads us to another huge fork in the road. Where should philosophy even start? Should we begin by trying to perfectly define simple words, or should we start by trying to tackle big, messy, complex problems? Rand's epistemology spends a lot of time on examples just like this one. How does a child learn the word table? The idea is that the mind sees a bunch of tables, it pulls out their common features, a flat top with some legs, and it creates this abstract concept of tableness. The focus is all on definitions, on language. But the Popperian critique basically says, hold on a minute, is that really what knowledge is all about? Instead of asking how we define a table, it asks the big questions. How did Newton come up with his theory of gravity? How did Darwin explain evolution? These aren't problems of definition, they're problems of explanation. So you see the fundamental conflict here. Is the main goal of a theory of knowledge to get all of our language perfectly neat and tidy? Or is it to give us a real method for actually making progress and discovering brand new things about the universe? So when you put this all together, what you're really looking at are two fundamentally different goals for what knowledge even is and what it's for. One path is searching for certainty, and the other is searching for progress. And this table just lays it all out. On one side, you have knowledge as the solid structure built on the bedrock of certainty, derived straight from reality with a laser focus on definitions, the end goal, justified true belief. And on the other side, you have knowledge as a journey. It starts with problems, moves forward by making creative guesses, and it's all about creating better and better explanations. The goal isn't certainty, it's progress. Look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. What this really matters is that your theory of knowledge, your own personal one, it shapes everything. It determines if you see a disagreement as a threat to your certainty or as a golden opportunity to find a mistake in your own thinking. It really shapes whether you go through the world trying to justify what you already think you know or trying to learn what you don't. And in the end, it all really boils down to this one single powerful question. When you try to understand the world, what's your ultimate goal? Is it to arrive at some final, unshakable certainty? Or is it to join in on the endless, exciting, and, humbling process of making progress?